First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this JAAS conference, and I congratulate you for establishing this body. It is very, very important to have a dialogue, discussion between the scientists, the public, the politicians, and everyone else involved. And there are many reasons for that, and perhaps one of them is, I think we will all agree, is that science is really running the world. If you look at the change that happened in our society for the last, 1,000 years, it's very clear that it's because humans succeed to make amazing discoveries that we can live the way we live today, right? That's really what makes us a modern society. It is human ingenuity that has been able to discover some unique characteristics of our nature that allows us to make the computer I'm talking to you. So first of all, congratulations for doing that. This is very important. And I'm also happy that this lecture is supported by the respective ambassadors in Japan and Israel. This is the 70 years of anniversary of the establishment of the relationship between Israel and Japan. And as you know, Israelis love Japan. They think it's a beautiful country with amazing people. And I do hope to be able to come again. For the last 2.5 years, it's been a bit complicated, but they have been very often to Japan, and I always love it. So let me try to provide you my view of the role of research, of scientific research, and also the strategy, or maybe the lack of strategy, than one should have when we run a scientific institution. I'm a scientist, I'm a physicist, I'm a professor of physics at the Weizmann Institute. I've been the president of the Weizmann Institute of Science for 13 years. And today I'm the chair of the academic board of the Israel Science Foundation, which is the granting agency of Israel. So perhaps in the United States, that would be the National Science Foundation. And I'm sure in Japan, you have a similar association that provides grants, I would say, competitive grants for research. And we do that in all areas of science. From humanities to social science, life science, engineering and physics and mathematics and so forth. So these have been my roles for the last 15 years or so. And during all these years, I have developed some, I would say, vision and maybe understanding of how one could be more successful in scientific research, given a given budget, of course. So maybe the best way to start would be to look a bit about the past and to ask ourselves if we can really predict the future of technology. We like to think that we know where the world is going, but I think that the history can teach us some very important lessons, and I think it's worth learning from them. For example, back in the 19th century, at the end of the 1890s, a very famous mathematician and physicist, Lord Kelvin, made a very strong statement saying that heavier than air flying machines are impossible. This is a scientist making a prediction, and it didn't take more than 10 years for having the first airplane flying. So you realize that making a prediction is really complicated. And I'm not talking about someone who doesn't know anything about science. I'm talking about one of the best scientists of the time. You may think this is about 120 years ago. So let's move a bit closer. For example, in 1977, in a technology that was already quite, I would say, present on the market, Ken Olson, who was the chairman and founder of the Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, at that time, this was a company that was in competition with IBM and was making big mainframe computers, made the famous statement saying that there is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. I want to tell you that in 1983, 6 years after that statement, I had my own PC at home. So you can see from these two examples that making prediction of how science and even more technology in this case is going to affect the world and going to be incorporated in our life is really complicated. Now we can look even at a better way of this. So the way that we think of scientific research and the way it influences the market, a very simplified way, perhaps even oversimplified way, is we believe usually that scientific research is trying to understand nature, and the role of scientific research is to fill up a reservoir of knowledge For academics, it means publishing papers. So we doing research in universities. The first role is to create the knowledge that needs to, to be known. And we do that because nature has a lot of secrets and we'd like to know what are these secrets. Then usually what happens is when the reservoir of knowledge is full or up to some level, the industry knows how to pick up this knowledge and try to find a market where application of the knowledge that has been filling up in this bucket can be actually useful, and the market create the products that we all like to use, or sometimes we don't like to use because these are drugs, but that save lives as well. This is, of course, a very, very simplified way of looking at how we go from science to technology. But one question we need to ask is the following. Is the technologies and products that are shown here on the right side really influencing the scientific research which is shown in the blue box on the left side? And the answer is, historically speaking, no. What fills up the bucket of knowledge has always been mostly curiosity. Historically speaking, I will show that to you, there's very little connection between the beginning of a research in a university or laboratory university or in the mind of a scientist and the end product. Let me show you what I mean by this, and also try to focus more on the real question we're trying to ask. What is really curiosity? And in order to really answer that question, I'd like to take you to something which is totally unrelated to curiosity, but still, I think, a very interesting statement made by Donald Rumsfeld after going to war in Iraq. You may remember he was looking for weapons of mass destruction, and he made the following three statements. He said, there are no knowns. These are the things we know that we know. Then there are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know. But then there are also unknown unknowns. These are things we don't know we don't know. And you don't know what? The most important in science is actually the unknown unknowns. The things we don't know we don't know. Most of the major discoveries were made by people who were surprised by things they did not know they did not know. I know it might sound like a complicated statement, but it's actually very easy. We have the feeling that either we know we don't know, but we also don't know that we don't know. And in science, there's probably more things we don't know than anything else. And so the role of curiosity is really to discover the unknown unknowns. Let me show you some examples to make it simpler. Let's go back maybe about 150, 170 years ago. When Wilhelm Röntgen, a physicist back in Germany, was trying to understand how electrons were moving into a gas. He was doing some very, very, let me say, boring experiment, not very interesting, and by the way, considered by everyone useless. Also, I have to say, these experiments were made in the past before him by many other people. All what he was trying to do is to measure how electrons move from one electrode to another one into a vacuum tube which was filled with different gases. And he was publishing papers. Probably these papers were not read by a lot of people. They were quite boring for most of the people. Making curves of what was the voltage at which there was a breakdown as a function, electrical breakdown as a function of pressure. Not very important, not very critical. Nobody was really paying attention, but it was his passion. And that's what he was doing. But one day, while doing his experiment, he found out that on the wall of his lab, there was some light, some fluorescence. And he was wondering from where the light was coming. And it was clear it came from his tube. And so to know from which part of the tube it was coming, he would cover the tube with cloths and then with paper and all kind of covering. And to his surprise, he could not make the light disappearing. This was almost impossible. I mean, nobody would thought that there could be some radiation that could go through some solid material. So what he did is what every man does when he doesn't know what he's doing, and he called his wife and asked her to put her hand in front of the light. And to his surprise, he could find the first pictures of the bone of the hand of his wife. You can even see the wedding ring to show that it was really his wife. So this discovery was not made because Wilhelm Röntgen wanted to discover X-ray. In fact, if you think about that, there's absolutely no way for anyone back in the 1880s to think that X-ray could exist. Nobody could dream that there's a radiation like this exists. It is impossible. This is a totally unknown. And what you see here is maybe what some people would call chance, but in our language, in English, we call this serendipity. It is the fact that Röntgen had an open mind. He was a very curious individual. And while he was doing a very well-defined experiment, he understood that something very strange was happening in his lab. And that, of course, became way more important than the experiment he was doing. But what you need to think and what you need to realize with this experiment, like many others, is that there's absolutely no scientific strategy or even a scientific programs to discover X-ray. Nobody could ask money for discover X-ray. There is no way to do that. This is all coming by what is called chance. But it's not really chance, of course. It's because Röntgen was a very good physicist who was doing curiosity-driven research. He was curious about what was happening. So this is what I mean by unknown. I'll give you other example that shape science in a different way, perhaps in a more modern way. I'm sure you all use the GPS global positioning system to come maybe even to this conference you're listening to. So the GPS, of course, is a very modern technology. And when we try to understand what is the basis or what are the critical elements behind the GPS, then we can all probably find a very specific spot at which this has been developed. For example, GPS would not work if it wasn't for the technology of satellites that have been launched back in the end of the 1970s that are sending signals to our GPS machine, right? The GPS knows its position because it can do triangulation with the position of many satellites that are orbiting around Earth and sending signal to us. You should know that in each of these satellites, there are at least one, and sometimes more than one, 2 atomic clocks. These atomic clocks were developed in 1955. The reason these clocks were developed, by the way, you realize already know, has nothing to do with GPS. It has everything to do because physicists were very curious to know how precisely we can measure time. In fact, there's really a fundamental question here. Are there a single unit of time? Can we really go down to infinite precision in time, or is there any limit? And this was a very curious question. Atomic clock would not work if it wasn't for the discovery by Isidore Rabi of what is called magnetic resonance, a very curious phenomenon that allows to align spins of atoms and split their states using magnetic field. By the way, this is a technology used in MRI machine that allows you to see beautiful pictures of bones, perhaps a bit like the previous technology I showed you of X-ray from Röntgen. And of course, magnetic resonance could not have been understood without the theory of relativity of Albert Einstein. So that's all what goes into the GPS and many more. It's fine to go backward and to follow the red arrows. GPS is because of satellites. Satellites include atomic clock. Atomic clock requires magnetic resonance, and magnetic resonance requires theory of relativity. But if I had asked you to go forward, to go from Einstein into magnetic resonance, into atomic clock, into satellite, and into global positioning system, nobody ever would find the road. There is no strategy that will bring you from the very beginning to the end to this research program. In fact, there is no program here. It is all a set of discoveries that were made by people who were curious, had no idea of what GPS would do, in fact, could not even dream of GPS, and create a system that is worth today billions and billions of dollars in terms of market. Without these very fundamental scientific discoveries, and more than these discoveries. The GPS would not work. Without the theory of relativity of Einstein, GPS would not provide the right location. And you can see how science works. It is not a strategy. It is a step of somewhat random discoveries driven by our own human scientific curiosity. And it is almost impossible, if not totally impossible, to make a prediction going from Albert Einstein all the way to the GPS. By the way, this is about 100 years of difference between the two. Perhaps even more clear to all of us is the role of electricity. Again, if you go back 150 years ago, of course, we could not have a meeting this way. I could not talk to you through my computer and the zillions of bits coming from my laptop to your screen, and there would have been no electricity. In fact, up to 150 years ago, so we would have been sitting, in a hall and have light because of candles. And by that time, by the way, there was a lot of research in candles. Most of it, by the way, in the UK. Candle industry was a very, very large industry. A lot of investment. The R&D for candle was huge. People were trying to create candles that produce more light, produce candles that will have different colors, different perfume, less smoke, etc., and etc. This was the high tech of the 19th century. And everyone thought that by investing more and more money in developing better candles, we will move technology forward. Then one day came one of many other gentlemen called Michael Faraday, and he discovered electricity. Now, Michael Faraday did not discover electricity because he was trying to improve candles. It's not because he was trying to move the technology one step forward that suddenly he discovered electricity. Electricity discovery came from a totally different direction, nothing to do from improving candles. So what you need to learn from this story is that it doesn't matter how much money you would invest in the R&D of candle, you would never invent electricity. So it's not only because you're improving technology that you would improve the world. Maybe you can look at the difference between email and fax machine. You can keep investing in fax machine, but that doesn't provide you emails and so forth. So many of the new discoveries are not always a continuation than the previous technology. It can come from a very, very different corner of science. You would think that these are all histories and this is in the past, but in the modern world, this doesn't happen anymore, and everything is more close to market and needs very precise technology. Well, let me show you a publication that was published just 4 years ago in 2018 in a well-respected journal called Science Translational Medicine. This is a perspective paper written by 3 individuals, by the way, 2 of them from the industry. So this is not even an academic paper, trying to learn about the fundamental science behind today's important medicines. So they took a list of many, many medicines, about 28 most important drugs in the world that we use today. These represent life-saving drugs for millions of individuals and sales of billions and billions of dollars. And they went and did an analysis of how these drugs were discovered. So on the left side, you see the scientific names of the 28 drugs. And the first question they asked, which is the second column here, is what's the origin of this drug in basic discoveries? And if you look at this column, you'll find that in 23 cases, these drugs were discovered by basic discoveries. What does that mean? It means the following. In the second column, they asked the question, is the origin where in basic discovery was discovery disease-oriented, meaning where the scientists trying to cure disease? It could be basic research based on a disease. And amazingly, the answer is 16 of them were not even disease-oriented research, meaning 16 out of 28 of these drugs, while 23 were basic discovery, 16 were not even intended to be related to any disease, not even to cure disease. It is a totally different kind of discovery that were made. But of course, one could also ask, was that supported by a program that was made to support drug discovery? And the answer is that in 23 out of these 28 drugs, none of them were part of a drug discovery program. So when you ask yourself how to discover new drugs, and you focus on diseases, history here, and this is relatively recent history, shows you that perhaps a better path is actually curiosity-driven research, because these are very fundamental discoveries where scientists were trying to understand characteristics of biological systems rather than the characteristic of a disease. And I think this is a very important lesson that we have forgotten, especially when we invest so much money in trying to develop new drugs. One thing, by the way, which is a bit sad, is if you look at the time delay between the drug discovery and the earliest relevant basis and the development time, meaning how long does it take to really, from the discovery to market? And here you see that the time is between 25 to 30 years. That's the time it takes from the very basic discovery all the way to market. And perhaps one thing we should think of is how to reduce this time. But believe me, this has nothing to do with scientific strategy. It is a totally different issue. So this is not old stories. The fact that curiosity is a key factor in making fundamental discoveries that have changed the face of our world is something we should not forget and something we should use. And the question, of course, is how do we use it? So the first thing we learn is that scientific strategy, which we all like to speak about, is actually usually quite a bad thing. Even scientists themselves, as we have seen, and for sure government, are quite bad at looking into the crystal ball and trying to determine directions and where we should be going. Think about what is happening today, where everyone is talking about quantum computing. That's fine. We can invest in quantum computing, but this is not a new science. Quantum physics exists for 100 years. And the idea behind using quantum physics to create quantum computers is about 50 years old. And if we had to wait for a scientific strategy to develop the ideas behind quantum computers, we would have been 50 years in delay. So you can see how this works. And new ideas do not come because scientific strategies have been defined, but because outstanding individuals have very unique ideas are moving forward. In fact, what I've learned over all my experience is that if scientific research, we have some strategic path, it should only be a compass, but not control the journey. Don't try to control the scientist. You might have a goal, but let the scientists work and do their duties. They are the best of finding and making these discoveries. Strategies do not help in making new discoveries. In fact, sometimes it focuses people so much that they are not seeing the beautiful things happening in their laboratories, and they're not curious enough. In fact, we are switching off their curiosity when we have too much strategy. So if there is no strategy, how do you create really new and valuable scientific knowledge? I mean, what is the plan? Let's not call it strategy. Or maybe we can call it a strategy, but not a scientific one. There is a strategy, just a human strategy, not a scientific strategy. And it's quite easy. The first one is to hire excellent scientists who are knowledgeable, curious, and very important, passionate about their own ideas. Own ideas is very important. You cannot be passionate about the ideas of someone else. You can only be passionate about your own ideas. And don't ask, what is it good for? Nobody asked Einstein what relativity is good for. That's how we got the GPS. The second thing is, if you have hired these excellent scientists, you have to offer them top quality human, that means students, technicians, engineers, and so forth, and administration, and physical infrastructure. That means very well-equipped laboratories. But that's the right order. First, excellent scientists, and then excellent infrastructure, not the opposite. Don't create amazing infrastructure with average scientists. I want to remind you that the best microscope in the world doesn't see anything. It is only the eye, even actually more, the brain of the scientists that see the image, not the microscope. So we can spend a lot of money on being the most modern microscope. It is totally useless if you don't have the top and excellent scientists. The third part is allow them to take risk. Failure is part of the business. In fact, those who are doing this kind of research will encounter more failure than success. It is a business where we fail most of the time. But unlike many other businesses, it is also a place where we learn from all these failures. And failures is part of the learning path of creating new ideas. It is only when we probe nature and we also understand what it is not all about that we can actually discover what it is all about. So taking risk and failing is good. It's part of the risk. And the more you fail, maybe there's a good chance if you're excellent, and I'll try to describe to you what excellent is, that you'll be successful one day. And last but not least, and very important, protect their freedom to think. Don't interfere. If you're confident that you have hired the excellent scientist, let them think freely. This is a very important part of my lecture. And I see today in many places that we are slowly reducing the freedom to think of all excellent scientists. And if people are excellent, they have to be given the freedom. Freedom of thinking can be taken from stupid people, but not from outstanding individuals. So this is the strategy. As you can see, there's absolutely no scientific strategy here. I'm not trying to tell you that we should invest in quantum science or in cancer research or in neuroscience or in sustainability. It doesn't matter. The basic stones are here. That's what needs to be done. And then, because these are excellent people, they will go their own way. Now, what's the difference between research in university and industry? That's very important. What I've described is that the university should transform money into knowledge, right? This is how the way I look at this. Remember the very first slides, the role of university is to fill up the bucket of knowledge. You would think then, where is the industry? Well, exactly. The industry follows up by transforming the knowledge into the product. And don't mix things up. University should not create product, and industry usually does not create knowledge. It's fine if they do it, but they are into product because they have to make money, and that's perfectly fine. And so we should have a division of role. It doesn't need to be completely strict, but the stricter it is, sometimes the better it is. Universities or academic research is to create knowledge, and knowledge doesn't need to be useful the day it is being created, but it will fill up the bucket of knowledge. And then it will be the role of industry to transform this into product. Sometimes there will be no connection between what the scientists had this in mind in creating the knowledge and the product. Just a few words about the institution I'm coming from. The Zajfman Institute works like this. We are a curiosity-driven research institute. We have 250 scientists in all areas of science, no engineering school. And as I said, we hire scientists who are knowledgeable, curious, passionate, and by the way, they're also lucky. We look for people with the talent to be lucky. You might smile. What is the talent to be lucky? Let me tell you, it is a real talent. Because lucky people are those who recognize their environment and see that there are opportunities. It's like in business. We often say that people in business have been lucky. It's not just pure luck, like buying a lottery card. It is individuals who have an open mind, open eye, and realize opportunities happening in their laboratories. And that can be recognized. And again, this has nothing to do with the field you're working on. It has to do about who you are. And that's very important. Science is done by scientists. It is a human, I would say, enterprise. So the Zajfman Institute culture is excellent people require an environment that is just as good as they are. Discovery-like learning is a phenomena that takes place in the human brain. Discoveries do not happen in the laboratory. They happen in the brain of the scientist. I've even seen discoveries made on the basis of experiments that have been performed many, many times by others. For 20 years, people do the same experiment. It is enough for someone with a very open mind to reproduce the same experiment but see a different result, and see that something in that result is unique and can be actually investigated. So even a reproducing experiment can be important if you do it in a way that allows people to be very curious about it. And that's why we can believe that our institute here, the Zajfman Institute, is a platform for scientific discoveries and breakthrough. And that's how we've been working for more than 70 years. We have no scientific strategy, none at all. Only outstanding people, very good environment, freedom and trust in the human brain. Does it work? Well, just to show you some indexes of innovation, this is the famous Nature Index 2017 innovation, the last published one, which measured the long road from ideas to inference in biomedicine, specifically here, and tried to understand which universities have transformed really the world of biomedical research by influencing its results, all the way from basic research. And on data compiled between 1985 to 2015, you see here the top 200 institutions by what they call the Lens score. And you see the usual suspect and also the Weizmann Institute here. And the reason we are so high placed in this ranking is because of the strategy, the human strategy I've described to you. We never had any strategy of making useful discovery, but only producing top value knowledge. And that's the result of this. This is how it works. Of course, it takes time. This is not something happening overnight. But if you're consistent with this strategy, you'll be able to really deliver high level of innovation. And again, the strategy behind this success is hire the best scientists, create the needed infrastructure, and provide the scientists the freedom to think. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so important that I want to stress it. How can I prove to you that we are providing outstanding scientific knowledge and not just applied science? Well, here is another ranking, which is called Leiden ranking, which measure in science the publication impact. And this is for 2021, the 10% most frequently cited papers in the world, relative to the size of the university, of course. And here you see the 15 first universities, and you see that the Weizmann Institute in terms of impact of publication, not the number of publication, but the 10% most frequently cited publication are the Weizmann Institute is number 8. Again, no strategy. And if you think about all these institutions here, you'll find that most of them by themselves have also no scientific strategy. They work along the same line. They try to find the best individuals, provide them the freedom to think, and the infrastructure to work. And I think this can be done in all countries in the world. It is a long-term strategy. You don't get the result a year later. You will wait for many years, but it delivers and it works. So to finish, every time I've been asked, because I'm a scientist, by people, what will be the next scientific revolution? I told them that because I'm a scientist, in fact, I don't know. I leave to those who do know science, those who do not know science, maybe to guess what's the next scientific revolution. I don't think we should guess what the next scientific revolution is. What we should do is to invent it. And that's a very different process. And how do we invent the next scientific revolution? Or what will make the next scientific revolution? Again, it's very, very simple. That will be driven by scientists who have a multidisciplinary view of science, the opportunity to take risk, the infrastructure to work, and the freedom to think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talk, Daniel. What you told us now is really something we really need in Japan. Okay, I have collected questions from audience, and let me ask you questions on behalf of them. First question is from Ms. Momoko Suda, a science journalist, and a similar question from Dr. Hiroshi Ichikawa, and let me read her question. Thank you very much for your excellent lecture. I was impressed by your clear and easy to understand presentation on the relationships between science and technology, the significance of curiosity-driven research, and the way scientific research should be supported. Please allow me to ask you a few questions regarding the recruitment of researchers at the Weizmann Institute and the way research funds are allocated. Is it possible to identify excellent researchers, as you mentioned in your lecture, when they have not yet made significant achievements? If it's possible, could you tell us some more detail about the selection process in Weizmann Institute? Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to my lecture, and I hope you appreciate it. And also thank you for the question. So at the Weizmann Institute, we hire scientists, we call them young scientists, after they have finished a postdoc. And that postdoc has to be abroad. We almost never hire someone who's finishing a PhD, let's say in Israel, and doesn't do a postdoc abroad. So the first step is that someone has to be exposed to a foreign culture. This is very important to open your mind. That's the first step. So only people who have at least been doing science in 2 different or 3 different countries are the kind of individuals who will hire. Because if not, you get too much inbreeding, and inbreeding doesn't develop curiosity. Then the hiring will be done on the basis of an international review, meaning once we are interested in someone, and again, it doesn't matter the field, we don't hire by field. It doesn't matter to us if it's a physicist or a biologist or chemist or whatever. We will approach almost everyone who has been working, who has been in touch with that young scientist, and get letters of recommendations. And we will look at the letters from the kind of individuals who have known very well the candidate and those who actually don't know really him or her, but they've just read the papers. And we will try to see if there is a good correlation between those who know the candidate and those who don't know him, but just appreciate the work. These are 2 different kinds of individuals. And because those who know him or her know who has done the work, and those who do not know don't know the kind of individuals, but can appreciate the impact of his work. And it's only after we have an international point of view of someone who is young that we'll start the next step of the process, which is also interviewing that candidate. Now, let me tell you, when you interview someone like this, you don't really too much ask about his knowledge, because it's very clear that knowledge is there. And if it's not there, then that person can probably learn something. But what we want to know, if that person is really passionate and curious about what he or she wants to do. And that's a human trait. I mean, this is something you can recognize, not only in the scientist. This is just trying to understand who is sitting in front of you. And if the eyes are actually very bright, and there's a lot of passion about doing their own work, we don't ask what is it good for. We just want to know that the ideas that this person is coming from are really ideas that are passionate in. Because as you know, science is complicated. There will be a lot of problems, and only passionate people will overcome problems, right? It's not only a matter of knowledge. If you're only knowledgeable but they have no passion, you leave the problem relatively early. If you're passionate and have knowledge, then you stick to it and try to solve it for a long time. So it is both an international process. It's very important to get international point of view and a human process. And that's basically what we do. And then we hire these individuals for a period of time. And we let them work for a few years until we decide if we finally hire them on a permanent position or not. And that can take about 5 to 7 years.
Great. Yeah, that's a really great system, and we can really learn from your system. And another question from her is that does the Weizmann Institute have a stable research fund allocated to individual researchers so that they can conduct research even without obtaining external competitive research funds? Could you briefly describe how research funds are allocated to individual researchers and how often they are evaluated, like every how many years?
Yeah. So yes, we do have internal funds that have, and we call them endowment funds. So that's very important because in the kind of research we're doing, we need a long-term view. Grants, external funding usually come for 3, 4, 5 years. And even if it's enough money, it's never enough time. And so you have to have internal funding that will allow the scientists to pursue their own curiosity for a good amount of time, as long as excellence is there. So with internal budgets, internal funds, that are completely in our hands, and we make our own decisions about who is going to get the fund. And by the way, it is not a democratic system, meaning that not everyone is getting funding and not everyone is getting the same funding. We have our own internal processes to decide how the funds are going to be allocated, okay? And of course, at the same time, we do require or request that our scientists apply for external funding from granting agencies like any other places in the world. So it's a combination of these two approaches. One of them is a very competitive one, external. We want to know, again, when you apply for grants, you get to hear from the external community, the international community. And when we provide funding from inside, we take our own trust, our own belief, if you want, in what the scientist is doing. And you need these two approaches at the same time working. So that's very important. Now, in terms of assessing the scientist, granting agencies do that anytime you apply for a grant, but we also have our internal process that assess every single scientist on our campus every 6 to 7 years. Within the international board of the Weizmann Institute, we have what is called the Scientific Advisory and Academic Committee. This is a committee made of outstanding scientists from all over the world, no Israelis. They come to our campus every year, and every year they make a full review of 1 or 2 or 3 departments. And when I mean by a full review, it is a full week on campus, interviewing. It's not just reading the paper and making an assessment over one day. There's a full week of assessment when they talk to everyone on the campus in a given department, from the last student, technicians, engineers, all the way to the principal investigators, and provide a real report that is going to the board of the institution and to the management of the institution with whatever is good, but very much important, whatever is bad. And if you cannot correct what is bad, then you're in it's not a good situation. So criticism is very important. It has to come all the time, and people have to be assessed all the time, even those who are on tenure. It doesn't matter. This has to come. And of course, this is part of our internal decision about budgeting scientists on our campus. So yes, having annual, not everyone every year, but every 5, 6 years, it doesn't really matter. We do a review of every single laboratory on our campus.
I see. So that's a very intensive review. Yeah.
It is a very intensive review, and it's a very critical one because it is also a personal one. But what I mean by this, again, remember, science is made by scientists. The science might be good, the science might be important or not important. That's fine. That's not what we're looking. The reviews are personal, meaning this scientist is a very good one, he does the right thing, or he's not doing the right thing. Not because the science is important or not, but because his approach to science is the good one or the bad one. And this is what needs to be checked, not if the science is important. In fundamental sciences, you can do research on things that you might look at not very important today. Just, as we've seen in the presentation, you don't know the future of what you're discovering. The question is, do you have the right approach? Are you convinced that this is new knowledge? And knowledge has to be important by itself, not because it has an impact or immediate impact on society, but because it provides us a new view of what nature is all about.
Great. Thank you. Okay, another question from Mr. Hiroki Matsuo, the Director of Office for Science, Technology and Innovation in the Cabinet Office in Japan. And his question is, currently, Japan is launching a support program for startup development as a major pillar of economic growth. In Israel, venture capital and state support, including YOZMA, is quite strong, and it is understood that Israel is a country that has advanced systems that support startup businesses. Small Business Innovation Research, which we call SBIR, is a mechanism for utilizing the results of the country's basic research in startups, and I'd be grateful if you could give us some advice on such systems that could translate buckets of knowledge into products or innovation.
Okay, so that's of course a complex question with a lot of details. But before starting and talking about how YOZMA works or how we support startup companies, I'd like to look a bit at the culture of individuals, because again, startups are usually made by individuals who strongly believe that what they are trying to do will change the world, not less. And of course, we also know that most of the startups are failing, right? It's very few startups are really successful. And so the first thing you need to have in a system that supports startup is accepting that most of them will fail. And the people who are doing that should not be ashamed to fail. And that's very, very important. A lot of startups are made by individuals who are not at the first initiative. They've been doing 1, 2, 3, 4 startups before, and all of them have failed. This is not a reason not to invest in the fifth one, okay? So we need to have a culture that allows people to fail, because there will be a lot of failure. There'll be more failure than success. And that has to be embedded into the strategy of the fund, understanding that this is the case and not be afraid of it. And people who fail should not be ashamed of failing, because if the system works well, when you fail, you also learn something, and there's value in the investment. So I think that's the first thing. The second is, and that's this is a very, also a cultural issue. You should not have too much respect for the authorities. When you try to create new technologies and you try to change the world, there will always be a lot of people telling you that you cannot do that, and it's impossible to do that. And usually it is going to be the older people who are going to tell the younger people that what they're trying to do is impossible and they've been tried before. Well, my experience is you should never tell people what is impossible. You can only tell them what is possible. They should discover by themselves what is impossible. So you have to allow young individuals, and that's very important. By the way, the age is important. Yes, it is important in this case, because only young individuals, if you provide them the freedom and the ability to break the rules in the good sense, right? To break the walls, not the rules, to break the walls, will take this kind of chance. And so in Israel, the idea is to really allow this dynamism to take place, to allow people to fail and fail again, and not be discouraged by these failures, and still keeping investing. Of course, we need to look in terms of startup at the value of a possible market and what kind of problem you solve. But I want to remind you that very often products or very successful products were not needed by a market, but actually create themselves the market. So that's another additional idea. What else can I mean, it's a very complex, oh yes, an additional point. Most of the startups, and when I say most, I mean 95% of them, are not created by professors from universities. As you've seen in my slides, professors in universities have a different role. Their role is to create and to fill up the bucket of knowledge. It is not because someone has successfully filled a bucket of knowledge that he can successfully create a startup with that knowledge. This is a different job. In fact, my experience has been that you should not let those who have discovered the new ideas to create their own startup. You should ask people who are expert in business and creating industry to pick up these ideas and develop the market. It's not the same kind of individuals. This is a different type of thinking. And so, of course, the scientists themselves could be advisor to the company, but they should not be the CEO or actually not be in the management of the company. And the reason is because As you know, most scientists are in love with their ideas. And it's fine to be in love with your ideas in the academy, but it's not a good idea to be in love with your ideas in the industry. It's a different kind of environment. And so one should divide the responsibilities between the discovery stage and the development and commercialization stage. So that's, in very few words, the way we in Israel look at this. And of course, this is a very long story, and I could have said much more, but I'll stop here.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. And basics are same for curiosity-driven research and also startups, right? Allowing them to take risks. Yeah, that's really important. Okay, maybe last question. We don't have much time, so question from Takuya Koike, and his question is: what kind of social system do you think which we need to protect? What kind of social system do you think we need to protect curiosity-driven research by providing them a sufficient position and money in our society? So curiosity-driven research, or freedom to explore and freedom to think is endangered, right? What do you think we need in this social system to protect such kind of things?
So that's a very important question, and I agree. Curiosity-driven research is at risk because everyone looks at the impact of technology on society on the good side and believe that if we invest now, the next year we'll get a result. And so there seems to be a link between technology development and the result we can achieve, which of course is right in a startup. But we need the freedom of thinking and the curiosity-driven research before that. And in my opinion, there are two ways, or maybe it's connected one way, to create a system that will protect this, and we need to protect it. And we can do that by educating the society about what science is all about. Scientists are usually shy to do that. They stay in their lab, they do very good science, and they believe that the society should support them. Maybe you can believe that or not, but if you don't communicate right, then you're not going to get that support, because at the end of the day, part of this is a political decision. And in order to influence politicians, we need to explain them how it works. And it's fine. I mean, politicians are right. If you don't provide them the explanation, they will make their own decision based on what they've learned. And we should respect this. And I see that all over the world, we don't insist and don't educate enough on the value of basic research. Here at the Weizmann Institute, we do that a lot. We expose the public to curiosity-driven research all the time. We are very proactive, and I'll give you one idea of what we've done here for the last 10, 15 years. And you see it's a very simple idea, but it's very strange, but it has a big impact. Every year, we take over the bars. Yes, the bars where we drink wine and beers in Tel Aviv, okay? And we, on Thursday evening, once a year, we send the scientists of the Weizmann Institute to 80 bars to Tel Aviv to provide a lecture about their own science, which is curiosity-driven. You would think this is a crazy idea, but you see, you can provide lectures in your own university, within the wall of your own campus. And if you do that, you only get the usual suspect, those who have heard you before, those who are interested. What you want to do is to talk to the people who do not know what you're doing in your universities. You have to get out of your comfort zone and talk to the individuals that usually would not come to you. They are the people to be convinced. By the way, if you go to their place, they listen to you. The issue is not that they're not interested. They are, but they just don't want to go into university because it seems to be a bit boring, sitting in a classroom. Go to a bar, give a lecture in a bar. That will be, believe me, a big effect. Or get on television, get on the radio, create a website, educate the kids. That's another thing we do. We have the Weizmann Institute as a large arm of education, not specifically connected to all science. We just teach the kids in schools, and you can look online. This is called the Davidson Institute for Science Education. We are the most well-known website for science education. We provide video, it's all on YouTube, it's all on the web. We get into classrooms, we explain what we're doing. If you don't take the time to explain what you're doing and why you're doing, and show the kids and their parents what is curiosity-driven research, the impact it had, and the impact it keeps having, there's no chance for you to create such an ecosystem. This will not survive the political pressure that needs results immediately. And so you have to be proactive. You cannot just believe that people support you because you do good research. It is not enough anymore.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that's really what we need to do in JAAS. So this JAAS need to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I congratulate you to starting this process. It is a very important one.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we have much more questions, but sorry, time is up. And we hope we can invite you to Japan in near future and ask you more questions and advices with more time. Yeah. Okay, Daniel. Thanks again for taking your precious time and for giving us a really wonderful lecture. We believe that if we are able to implement your concept idea, that is curiosity-driven research in Japan, it is highly likely that science in Japan will be much healthier, get stronger, contribute much more to fill up the bucket of knowledge in the world, which will help making innovation leading to a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.